Presidio. We want to be able to share with you all why we feel like this is the beginning of a great relationship where two companies are getting together in order to provide great solutions for organizations like yourselves. Then we're going to talk for maybe 10 to 15 minutes about how 7Signal works and how it's different. So those are some really important aspects of the solution that you might not be aware about yet. And then we're going to bring in Jim Vajda from the Christ Hospital. Now, Jim is a current customer using the 7Signal system for Wi-Fi performance management. Really looking forward to hearing his view, his take on the solution, and we're going to, almost in interview style, converse with Jim about his experiences. And then finally, again, if you have questions along the way, write them into that chat box or that question box, and Angela will help moderate those towards the end, okay? So with that said, I wanted our friends from Presidio, whether that be Robert or Chris, to just kind of introduce the concept of working with 7Signal and just kind of what you see so far in terms of a relationship with our technology company. Are you guys out there?
Yeah, can you hear me okay, Eric?
Sure can, thank you.
Okay, yeah. So thanks, Eric. Yeah, appreciate the intro. For the customers that are attending today that I haven't had a chance to meet, my name's Rob Harvey. I'm the sales director here in the Dublin, Ohio office. I also have Joe Schomloffel on the phone, who is aligned to most of the customers that are in attendance today. Joe is the account manager. He's a senior account manager here. He's very focused in the healthcare and hospital space. So I think you'll find a very targeted message from that. And then also with me is Chris Couch, and Chris has been on site at several of the customers that are in attendance today. Chris is a senior wireless engineer. Both Chris and I have been with the combination of NetTech and Presidio for close to 7 years. So very well experienced. A few points on Presidio. Presidio in the healthcare space, it's our largest vertical. It makes up about 27% of our revenue. Presidio's, our go-to-market, as a lot of you have probably seen, is around strong local architecture and engineers like Chris. Our Dublin office has over 70 employees. I know the Indianapolis office is a very similar model with a number of architects, engineers, and employees. Specific to 7Signal, we've made a lot of investments with partnering with them, with understanding the technology. And those investments come specifically in our wireless engineers that we have spread across the offices within the region. So hopefully a lot of our customers on the phone have benefited from that. We feel like the investments in 7Signal is a good investment. They've got a strong tool. Wi-Fi is certainly top of mind for a lot of hospitals, as it's very challenging, which we'll see from some of the slides. I can't thank you enough for your participation and attendance today. And hopefully, you'll find it to be worthwhile. If there's follow-ups, any of you can feel free to reach out to me or Joe Schomloffel. We can help, schedule meetings, follow-up phone discussions, that sort of thing, if you have any questions. So thanks. So with that, I'll pass it back to Eric, and you can proceed.
Yeah. Thank you, Rob. Appreciate it. Very excited to be working with a great organization like Presidio. We feel like our technology complements what you're trying to achieve from a mission and vision standpoint really well. So thank you for allowing us to participate. So let's just get right into how the system works. I think that that's a very important first step. So let's go over this. So this is pretty much your environment. Your environment is going to include access points, Aruba, Cisco. You're going to have your devices. Those devices can be tablets, laptops, smartphones. A lot of you have probably thousands of workstations on wheels. And what we have, or what we want to introduce into the situation first and foremost, is our unit that we've created that we call the Sapphire Eye. And the Sapphire Eye is a high-performance client, first and foremost. Now, it kind of looks like an access point. It's about this big. It looks like an access point, but it's not. It's a client. And as a client, it's going to be in your environment, testing the Wi-Fi network from the client's point of view 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And you're going to put this unit in the mission-critical areas where you really need to keep an eye, no pun intended, on your Wi-Fi every day, all the time. So from a hospital standpoint, this is going to be in the emergency department. This might be in radiology. This is generally maybe perhaps maternity. And also in guest areas where there's a lot of guests congregating, they're in waiting rooms, they're waiting for their loved ones, and you really need to see what the Wi-Fi looks like every day, all the time. So the Sapphire Eye, as a client, it's going to associate to a radio, and so we're going to be looking for things like beacon availability and radio association. Next, it's going to authenticate, so we're going to give it credentials just like a client, and we support over 15 different kinds of authentication. We can even program the Sapphire Eye to go through a captive portal, if that's what you have for a guest network. And then once it gets on and gets through authentication, it's going to get an IP address, so we're testing DHCP services, which not a lot of people have visibility to. So we'll actually be able to see, okay, can I get an IP address, or has the server maybe run out of IP addresses to give out? And then once I'm on the Wi-Fi network, I'm going to do client-like things with the Sapphire Eye. We're going to simulate reaching servers. We're going to simulate downloading web pages. We're going to simulate uploading and downloading files. We're going to simulate voice over IP or voice over Wi-Fi with UDP packets. And we're going to be doing that all the time. And if there is a breach in compliance with the service level that you have set for those benchmarks, for those key performance indicators, then you will be alerted instantly. That is a key part of the solution. So if for whatever reason we don't see a beacon, an access point sometimes stops beaconing. You will be alerted instantly. If we can't authenticate, if we can't get an IP address, if throughput goes into the tank, you'll be alerted immediately. You will be alerted through either an email alert or an SNMP trap that can go into whatever network operation system that you have in order to see the visibility of what's going on in your network. So that's half the story. That's half of what the Sapphire Eye does. The other half is that it indeed is a Wi-Fi sensor. So as a sensor, it has a built-in spectrum analyzer. So 24 hours a day, we're recording what's going on in the air from a physical standpoint. It allows us to not only do that, but also do channel utilization measurements, as well as airtime utilization measurements. And when you take all of that and you combine it with the throughput, packet loss, latency, and jitter testing that we're doing 24 hours a day, you now have a unit that is layers 1 through 7, seeing what's going on in your environment, and is able to alert you when it sees something going amiss. And then when you dive into the system, tell you pretty much what is going on. Do I have an interference problem? Do I have sticky clients? Do I have access points that are operating at low data rates, for instance? So really remarkable with the capabilities that it can do. And it's going to attach to what we call the sonar, which you see in the upper right-hand or upper left-hand part of your screen. The sonar is simply a test endpoint, and we can put them anywhere you want in your environment. So the test endpoint is just going to be a place where we can upload and download files and simulate our voice over IP calling. So really nice to have that unit, like I said, in strategic locations. Now, over the years, a lot of our customers said, this is great, but looking at it from the end user's point of view, can we take it to the next step? And the next step is, can we put software on actual client devices so that we can gain even more insight into how these clients are roaming, how they're performing, what kind of configuration they have from a device driver standpoint or operating system, and correlate that with the actual performance that they're achieving while on the Wi-Fi network? And the answer is yes, that's what Mobileye is. So we recently came out with Mobileye, and it's either an app or an agent that you will install on your workstations on wheels or whatever other devices that you have. It's compatible with Windows, Mac OS, Android, and iOS. We have a lot of customers in the healthcare space who have, for instance, scanners that are running on Android, and they can put these this tiny little agent on a scanner so that they can crowdsource that Wi-Fi performance data every time that item is in use. Now, this allows us to do two things. When something goes wrong, we can be alerted and we can see. Or if a person calls and says I'm having trouble, now I have a performance history. I can see all the access points that this device roamed to and from. I can make sure that they're on the right channel, that they're on the right band. I've got basically a characterization of the experience from the end user's point of view. So gone are the days where we simply don't have any visibility. But in fact, what we do is we take all of this data and we put it into the cloud where you log into your tenant, and now you have the visibility, the performance history, and also the ability to diagnose and prescribe a solution, because you can see what now is going on. Do I have co-channel interference? Do I have physical interference? Do I have sticky clients? Do I have roaming issues? You're going to be able to now see that and take action accordingly. So one other thing I wanted to mention on this slide, from a performance history standpoint, many times people will call you and say, hey, we were having a problem yesterday or last week. Now you'll have the ability to go back in time and see what actually was happening in the environment from a spectrum standpoint, all the way through layers 1 through 7, what was happening in the environment from your access points point of view and what was going on in the air. Okay. Now, this is what most people sort of get today, and this is where I wanted to bring in Chris a little bit here. Chris, you're probably really familiar with what people get out of Cisco Prime. Is that correct?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, so Cisco Prime is great, and what we really try to tell people with regards to whether it be Cisco Prime or Aruba Airwave or whatever system that you might have is that we complement. We don't compete with those systems. Those systems are providing you really important information with regards to the clients that are connected to the access points that have joined your network. You're getting CPU and memory utilization, the bandwidth utilization, and high usage clients. But Chris, let me ask you this. Are you actually getting the Wi-Fi experience from the end user's point of view through Cisco Prime?
You get some visibility, but not to the level that I've seen the IQ running specifically in our environments and in general. The amount of data that you can see from IQ is quite nice to have and does complement Cisco Prime. Since Prime's more of a historical over time view, you can get a lot faster data from.
Okay, good, good. Yeah, you know, one of the things that also I've been told by customers is that Cisco Prime, or when you go into the system, if somebody were to say I was having a Wi-Fi problem either right now or yesterday, everything looks fine. And it's because, like you said, Chris, it doesn't have the granularity, that visibility into what actually is going on in the air or at the client level. So making it difficult for somebody to troubleshoot and get to the bottom of a Wi-Fi issue. Now, Chris, maybe you can explain, I mean, what a Wi-Fi environment is like in a hospital. You've probably seen it. It's pretty challenging, no?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of moving parts and a lot of different equipment coming from many different vendors, and most of the time IT doesn't know about them because doctors go out and purchase them on their own. So it gets quite interesting to try to troubleshoot all those devices across an organization typically as large as healthcare is.
Yeah. And that's exactly why a lot of folks will implement our system, is because we're going to help manage that change. So while your design might not change from a Wi-Fi network standpoint, but every maybe 3 to 4 or 3 to 5 years, what is going to change is exactly what Chris described. You've got new devices coming out all the time. I mean, we just had you know, Apple make some announcements. Samsung is making announcements. We have new devices, new software coming into the environment all the time. And many times IT doesn't know anything about it, making it really difficult to get a handle on what is going on as devices move in and out, as they roam from access point or from floor to floor. What kind of insight do we have into actual devices and what they're up to? And so when you take both the Sapphire Eye, which is monitoring a whole area, and because of its unique antenna array, one Sapphire Eye can attach like a client at neg dB, or I'm sorry, at neg 65 dBm or better. It can actually attach to them like a client at that signal strength 4, 5, or 6 access points depending upon your environment. So sometimes if we have a lot of small cells, we can even attach one Sapphire Eye to 7, 8, or 9 access points, and that's really important to understand from a coverage standpoint. So this is really sort of how the 7SIGNAL is different. You're going to get a lot of good information from your wireless LAN controller, but in terms of characterizing roaming behavior of devices, seeing in an area 24 hours a day what's going on in the physical environment from a spectrum standpoint. If you have Cisco or if you have Aruba, sometimes you have to switch off Wi-Fi in order to turn on, for instance, clean air or spectrum or even walk around with a tool. And what you're doing is you're now hunting and pecking, trying to find the problem instead of capturing it in the act, and that's really the key here. We've been measuring wired networks like this for 30, 40 years, and now because Wi-Fi is becoming mission critical, it's time that we start measuring wired network or wireless networks the same way. So when you put this system in place, there's really 3 huge benefits that I hope you guys can recognize. And one is when there are issues, you now have a dashboard where and a control panel where you can actually see in all of your different buildings that you have or all of the different hospitals that you have all over town. You don't have to travel to those organizations or to those offices anymore because everything is right at your fingertips. Some of our customers like to use the Sapphire Eye as a remote packet capture device. If they can't quite see what's going on, they can just turn on packet capture for a few seconds or for a minute, turn it off, download that PCAP file, and open it up in Wireshark and just pick the packets apart to their heart's content. That's something that one of our customers does who has offices all over town, and they find this really a convenient way to save time and money. Now, obviously, really big is enhancing the patient experience, enhancing the guest experience. When people fill out that HCAHPS survey, you know, they have in mind, while there's not a question on the HCAHPS, which says, how was the Wi-Fi? In many respects, it's kind of built in there already with regards to just the overall experience of being in the hospital. So it is becoming increasingly important. And then obviously we want to reduce complaints. So now we reach the point of our presentation here where I really want to introduce Jim Vajda. Jim, are you there out there?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you loud and clear. That's great. And wanted to talk to you, Jim, because you're a recent customer. You're you've implemented portions of the solution already, and you're getting ready to introduce some more portions of the solution. And I guess one of my first questions for you, Jim, is what kinds of mission-critical applications do you have in the hospital that have been difficult for you to get a handle on from a performance management standpoint?
Well, for us, probably the #1 on the Wi-Fi is voice. We've got about 1,000 Cisco 7925 and a few more 8821 phones. And their performance is, of course, as we know, very sensitive to any RF disruptions or any, you know, they're kind of the canary in the coal mine when it comes to Wi-Fi performance. And we use those for very critical business processes here in our hospitals. We also have WOWs that we run Citrix clients on, where our EMR application is served. Those are constantly moving up and down the halls, and they need to have good wireless performance as well. And then we've got a whole kind of group of devices I sort of refer to as clinical IoT. It could be IV pumps or glucose monitors or all sorts of devices like that that are small, usually battery powered and used for little bits of clinical activity. But we've got a lot of that stuff floating around too, and those aren't always the most dependable wireless clients either.
Yeah, and they're taking up valuable and precious airtime, and as you know, I mean, the air is a shared medium, and once you run out of air, you know, all of the devices start to suffer. So, I mean, you have a lot to handle and a lot to manage from an airtime utilization standpoint, from a spectrum standpoint. So my next question, Jim, is what were you using or what were you looking for in a solution to try to help you get a handle on everything that was going on?
Yeah, so we really relied on Cisco Prime infrastructure and output from WLCs to do a lot of our troubleshooting and get a handle on how the WLAN was performing. And there's a real lack in visibility in terms of taking that data and trying to figure out what the actual end user experience is.
Yeah.
That's where 7SIGNAL really started to look attractive to us. So
there are some portions of the 7SIGNAL system that you've already started to implement. Which ones are those? Is it the Mobileye product, the Sapphire, or both at this point?
We have both. We have a new hospital where we've got Sapphire Eyes fully deployed. Then we've got Mobileye on some of our WOWs sort of strategically deployed for specific troubleshooting reasons. And we're getting ready to do a enterprise-wide deployment of Mobileye as well.
Now, when you implemented the Sapphire Eyes, were there certain areas of the hospital that you wanted to implement first because you were most concerned about getting good visibility as to what's going on in the air in those areas?
There was, yeah. We, in our proof of concept, deployed Sapphire Eyes in our emergency department.
Okay.
And a few other clinical areas that were sort of those sources of the most tickets, where sort of the wireless problems might be the most elusive, but we keep getting reports about, hey, all of a sudden none of the phones worked, or my WOW isn't working very well, those sorts of things. But now we are deploying the Sapphire Eyes to both of our hospitals. And we're going to try to cover all the floor space in both of them.
Nice. Now, you had also mentioned Mobileye and that you had deployed it to a few hundred or so workstations so far. What kind of information are you getting out of that so far that has been useful?
Mobileye has been great. One of the challenges I've had since I started here is a lack of standardization in the adapters and drivers that were installed on the WOWs. So
right.
We might get tickets about the Wi-Fi stinks in this corner of this wing. And we go and everything's fine. Well, the actual problem was that WOW had a 2.4 gigahertz only adapter with really buggy drivers on it. And
right.
when that nurse came through that put the ticket in, she said the Wi-Fi stinks, which, the blame first goes to the infrastructure. It doesn't usually go to the client. So
right.
having Mobileye really helped me make the case that we need to standardize on these and look at this data. It shows that some of the adapters we're using are roaming really poorly, and that's affecting the business. And that was the ammunition that we needed to say, okay, let's go spend several $1,000s ripping and replacing some of this hardware, the stuff that the data shows works a lot better.
That's great. That is fantastic. And you said that with regards to full deployment, so this would be more, so you have it installed on WOWs, and so do you mean more WOWs across your hospital system?
Yes, we're going to install it on all of the WOWs in both hospitals.
Okay, that's great. That is fantastic. Now, the other question I had for you was with regards to, looking at, Cisco Prime. I mean, if you recall, Chris and I were talking about how they complement each other really well. There are certain things that you can get out of Cisco Prime. There are other things that you get out of 7SIGNAL. Do you find that as well, that they kind of complement each other?
Yeah, I do. I think Prime is a great tool for managing and monitoring the infrastructure itself.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to getting really granular information about what's going on in the RF and what the experience of specific clients are, the tools from 7SIGNAL are fantastic at that.
Nice, nice. Another question with regards to implementation. I'm sure there are some people out there who might be wondering, okay, well, how do you install this thing? You know, obviously installing anything in a hospital is a little bit more tricky because you have to be careful with regards to any time you open up the plenum or whatever it might be. Can you share with our audience what challenges you had, or no challenges if there weren't any, with regards to installing the Sapphire Eye, and also with regards to the process for implementing or installing Mobileye onto your workstations?
The Sapphire Eye, hanging those is basically has the same challenges as hanging a new AP.
Okay.
We're lucky that we kind of have a cabling vendor that does a lot of work for us, and we've used in the past for similar work. So for them, it's very similar to hanging a new AP, but like you said, you have to have a special permit to get into the plenum, and you have to obviously work around schedules if you want to put a new Sapphire Eye in a patient room, things like that. But for the most part, I'd say, hand off a map to my vendor and say, this is where I want them, and this is the direction the antenna should point, and go for it.
And what kind of coverage are you getting from a Sapphire Eye? We talked about how one Sapphire Eye can generally see 4, maybe 5 or 6 access points at neg 65 dBm or better. Are you experiencing something similar?
Yeah, I think we're right in that range. We have a voice grade deployment, so we have a fairly dense deployment in both of our hospitals. So they see, I want to say maybe 6 in some cases.
Okay, great. That's fantastic. And I want to remind everybody that if you do have questions, type them in. We'll get to those just very shortly. Also, Jim, with regards to Mobileye, how do you deploy that to hundreds or thousands of workstations?
We have handed it off to our desktop engineering team, and they're using, I don't recall if it's a GPO, it might be SCCM, just to push.
SCCM is pretty popular, yeah.
Yeah, to push the installer out to all the devices that we specify. And then we've got sonar servers in both of our hospitals. So while in one hospital, we'll run tests against the server in its hospital and not across the WAN. So that helps us isolate issues to the local network when we're looking at that data.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Many of our customers will implement multiple sonars so that they can segment, okay, where is the bottleneck, because certain traffic will go through certain routers and switches and firewalls. So that is good to know. And how many, just tell us a little bit about Christ Hospital and the size and scope of your hospital network around the Cincinnati area. Is it just, is it the tri-state area, or is it just in greater Cincinnati?
We are in the tri-state area, basically in the Cincinnati region, northern Kentucky area. We've got one large main hospital, and we just opened a new hospital in Liberty Township. Then we have somewhere between 45 and 50 remote sites. 6 of those are outpatient centers that are fairly large. The rest of them are physicians' practices.
Yeah. And Jim, how big is your IT staff to handle all of those facilities?
I think our total IT headcount somewhere around 150. A huge number of those people are application people that work on our EMR system.
And what about from a wireless standpoint? How many people, in addition to yourself, I'm hoping in addition to yourself, handle the Wi-Fi?
There's really just one. In addition to myself, it's a shared responsibility with the team. But I'm a wireless engineer, and I certainly don't mind taking it all on. So this has been a huge time saver for us. You talked about doing remote PCAPs with the Sapphire Eyes, and that's one of my favorite features as well.
Good.
working with our new hospital up in Liberty Township. That's about a half-hour drive from where my office is. But I have the ability to do a remote packet capture anywhere in that hospital at any time and look at spectrum analysis data and everything else. There's almost no reason that I'll ever need to travel up there to do any troubleshooting. And I've even done it while I've had, you know, people experiencing problems on the phone with me, ask them where they are, figure out, you know, what AP they're on, and run a PCAP and do a little quick analysis. It really is that convenient.
Yeah, that's great. Well, we don't want you to, you know, you should get up and stretch your legs once in a while, Jim.
Yeah, well, I do that too, but the more time I can spend working and not just driving from site to site is good.
Nice, very good. Okay, this has been fantastic, and what I'm hoping, Angela, and I'd like to bring you back in here, I'm hoping, Angela, that there are a couple of questions out there. If you have a question for Jim or anybody from the Presidio or 7SIGNAL group, then please ask that question now. Any questions, Angela, for Jim?
It looks like we have a couple of questions.
Okay.
The first was, I'm sorry, this might actually be for you,
okay.
but it says, will the Sapphire work with cloud-based systems like Meraki?
Yes, absolutely. We have a few Meraki customers, in fact, and while Meraki provides, again, some good visibility into what's going on in the Wi-Fi network, a lot of customers find that our system will provide the extra bit of detail that you need in order to really get to the bottom of what's going on. So we work in, we're platform independent. So remember, the Sapphire Eye is a client, so it'll connect to any Wi-Fi network and any access point provider that you have, just like any other client would. So.
Okay. It looks like, there's another question here. While Presidio and 7SIGNAL partner together, does Presidio have a deep engineering knowledge of 7SIGNAL to help implement and optimize the solution at customer sites?
Yeah, I'll hand that over to Chris.
Yeah, Chris Camulli.
Yeah, so I have gone through some of the 7SIGNAL training and up to speed on the software itself. We do partner with 7SIGNAL for some of the back-end implementation of their product, but we do have the expertise to help implement and engineer this solution for you.
Yeah, but I think from a business model perspective, we've got 3 dedicated wireless engineers here in Columbus, and I believe we have the same in the Indianapolis market, so for what that's worth.
Absolutely. And then the last question is, how do I try it out?
Hey, Jim, could you go through the process of how you got started? I think that would be useful. And then, you know, either James Vickers or Rob could maybe talk about how to get started as well. But Jim, what was that whole beginning process like for you in terms of trying it out?
Yeah, so we started with a pretty open-ended proof of concept. We kind of talked through with James what some of our issues were, what we needed, where we needed some help, where, you know, the capabilities of 7SIGNAL kind of match. And then we got a few Sapphire Eyes and some licenses for Mobileye, and away we went.
So what about just a couple weeks time, and you guys were able to just kind of, after you plugged it in, how long did it take for you to start getting some data that was, you know, interesting to talk about?
It was pretty fast. We were troubleshooting some active issues that we didn't have visibility into at the time. So we were sort of pushing, let's get this out there and see what we see in the air. And 7SIGNAL's SEs were great about, you know, obviously it was new to me, but helping me configure everything, getting everything set up, getting reports and alarms and everything going so that it was up and running really quick, and it was, I don't know, maybe a matter of days before we started solving some problems with it.
Nice.
One thing that jumps to mind was we experienced what was a pretty common issue with the Cisco 3702 AP, where the 5 gigahertz radio would be beaconing, but it would not accept client associations. It wouldn't actually ACK any packets. So if you were walking by with a phone and your phone tried to roam to that AP because it saw the beacon frames, all of its frames would just go unacknowledged, the call would drop, and then the phone would have to roam somewhere else. It was pretty ugly. And it was also very intermittent. So again, it's a kind of issue where you get this call that all the phones don't work, and then you run over there and everything's fine. And there's no trap in Prime, there's no data on the WLC that tells you what's going on. So we've deployed a Sapphire Eye to one of those problem areas, and it was a matter of days before we saw, oh look, the radio's beaconing, but the eye cannot associate for 10 minutes, and then it can. And, oh, okay, let's try to capture it in the act and run a packet capture, and look, you can see right there in the PCAP what's going on. So
wow.
It helped us out very quickly right away. So did Mobileye with being able to compare the adapters and drivers in our WOWs. That really gave us a lot of clarity about what some of the wireless issues, what the root cause of some of those issues were that we had been experiencing too.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yep, good to hear. Yeah, we love it when we hear how we're saving people time, so very nice. Angela, any other questions for Jim? Or I think the question was, how do we get started? Perhaps we didn't quite finish answering that question. If maybe Rob or Chris or James could chime in with that would be great.
Yeah, James, maybe you could take that. When you talk about, we obviously have a couple of customers that are doing this, but what do you see across the board? What's the best approach from the 7SIGNAL perspective?
Yeah, for sure. Just as Jim indicated, being able to do that POC is great, and it's real simple, as Jim indicated. Everyday price, and within days we're able to see it pretty quickly. Some great information and moving forward.
Cool. Yeah, okay. And just to maybe bridge some networking for the folks that are on the call. We've got Ohio Health on the call. We've got Nationwide Children's. We've got Avita Health, OSU Med Center, Licking Memorial, and I believe we also have some folks from Berger Hospital. We've got a mix of engineers and management attending the calls. So amongst our customer base, if there's interest in connecting to another hospital and talking to them about some of the wireless challenges that they may have, we can certainly help bridge that gap. But I also wanted to, if there's other questions, please, again, feel free to throw those out. But I want to thank Jim for his time today. Want to thank Eric for, keeping things on track in his presentation and the investments from 7SIGNAL. And also want to thank James Vickers. I think James is definitely a key piece to the partnership between Presidio and 7SIGNAL. He's done a great job surrounding his team with our team and making sure we understand account alignment and those sorts of things. So I don't know, Angela, I don't know if there's any other questions out there, but also thank you for doing a nice job with the moderation.
Absolutely. That wraps up all of the questions that we had today, unless anyone else wants to put another question in the chat box. But otherwise, we will be following up with a short survey following the webinar today. If you could just complete that and then let us know or reach out to your Presidio account rep and let us know how we can help you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Have a wonderful day.
Thanks, everyone.
Yep, thanks.